Hello, welcome to our conscious parenting workshop. Ignore the date on there. It's not January 2023. It's actually August. But I am recording this workshop for you on perception and composure today. I'm really excited you're here with us and you are joining us in this journey of being better parents for our kiddos. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Parent Therapy. These classes are, yes, about how to help our children to thrive, to learn these wonderful skills, but they are also really about us, right? Conscious discipline is an adult-first model. If you watched our intro class before, it talks all about that. Like, we have to change your behavior as you interact with your child before we can change your child's behavior. And this is how this works. So this is also parent therapy. This kind of helps us figure out why we do the things that we do when we interact with our kids and ways that we can do things better. And so it's really about us first, and then how we implement these skills with our children. So this is a safe space here. We all make mistakes. I've done conscious discipline for almost 10 years now, and I love it, and I wholeheartedly believe in it, and I still make mistakes, and I still face times of overwhelm with my children, and I still lose it on them. And so I just want to say before anything else that your parenting struggles are welcome here. None of us are perfect, and that we're seeking that progress, not perfection. And so let go of any shame or guilt that you have in this space. This is a journey. This is a lifelong journey, and that's one you're not going to get a trophy for at the end. It's just a process of growing and becoming and failing and misstepping and trying again for our kids. And it will be forever. This is just being the best parents we can be and trying our best every single day. And so get comfortable with the fact that you're going to have moments of failure, be able to be reflective and to work through it and try again. Okay. And so with that, here are my true when I teach these classes. All parents are doing the best that they can with the knowledge and resources that they have available to them. I wholeheartedly believe that. I do not come to this space with judgment. I've been in places where it is so hard to be a parent. It's so hard to work with tiny children and humans, and it can be incredibly frustrating and incredibly triggering. And so I have zero judgment. And I'm so glad that you're here and showing how vulnerable you are and being willing to get comfortable with being vulnerable. Progress, not perfection, is the goal to being the best we can for ourselves and our families. And also, we want to model this for our kids. We want to show them that perfection is not the overall desired response. No one can be perfect. We just want to always exemplify that we're seeking for progress, right? And you can't do it all. This is a lot of information. It's a lot of stuff to try on, a lot of skills and strategies to try. So just pick one. That's how I learned conscious discipline. I highly suggest just choose one thing to try out for the next couple of weeks, and then try on something else. And before you know it, you'll be doing a lot of these things as you build the habit of doing them. Okay. So just a little introduction about me before we get started. My name's Lucy. I have a degree in early childhood education. I've been a teacher for over 7 years. I have my own 2 kiddos right there. And I am a parent educator for parents as teachers. And I also volunteer for Postpartum Support International as a coordinator, and I'm on the board for the Missouri chapter as well. I have experience in project approach, conscious discipline, play-based learning, the Reggio philosophy, and even International Baccalaureate curriculum and implementation. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. So we'll just do a little refresher. If you haven't watched the intro class on this, it's a little bit long. I think it's about an hour and a half, 2 hours. But if you have the time, it's really great. It just kind of goes into an overview of all of this. And in each one of these workshops, we'll be diving a little bit more into depth about some of these things. So conscious discipline is an evidence-based and trauma-informed approach of working with children and using some of these discipline strategies. Okay? It's recognized by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration and the National Registry of Evidence-Based Programs and Practices. It has high ranks among the Harvard Analysis Social Emotional Learning Programs. So it's wonderful. It's been tested. It's been tried. It's research-based. Like I said, this is not something new. This is not some fad. This is research-based information. It's an adult-first discipline model. That means we have to change your behavior to change your child's behavior, right? We have to focus on how you are interacting with the situation in order to teach the skills. It's evidence-based and trauma-informed, and it utilizes brain science, okay? All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about the brain states and just kind of refresh our memory on this. Your brain, when we're working with our kids and all humans, has three main states when we're talking about like the social emotional responses that we engage in on a day-to-day basis. We have the survival brain state, that's in our brain stem. And this is that fight, flight, or freeze. This is that instinctual response, right? So this is typically when we see our children engaging in a lot of physical behaviors because your brainstem, your survival, has taken over. And so we see like kicking and hitting or biting, scratching. This is like very primal, right? And so your brain in this state is asking, am I safe? I need to do whatever I need to do to stay safe. I'm protecting myself. I need to be safe. And then we have the emotional part of our brain. This is our limbic system. And this is where we typically get a lot of like big emotional responses. We get whining and crying or yelling and being really excited and all these things, but not necessarily the like physical primal that we typically see in that survival state. And it's asking, am I loved? Right? Am I loved? Am I cared for? Am I connected? Okay. And then once we've moved out of that brain state into the executive part of our brain, this is the prefrontal cortex, the prefrontal lobe. This is where we get children who are calm or adults who are calm and cooperative and can make choices and make decisions and can problem solve and collaborate. This part of our brain is asking us, what can I learn? And so we need to remember that in order for our children to learn a new skill, they must be in the executive state of their brain. If they are not, if they are in the emotional state or they are in the survival state, they are not learning a new skill. You cannot logic with a child who is in their survival state or in their emotional state. Their brain is not ready to take on new information and to learn a new skill. And so we have to move them through these brain states when we want to teach them a new skill and how to handle something appropriately. Okay. All right. So tonight, like I said, we're going to be talking about two different things. But before we get into that, I want you to just imagine for a moment, you wake up in the morning, you're a little groggy and sleepy, and you walk into the bathroom to be greeted by this giant spider on your bathroom counter or on your mirror. What is your response? How do you react to this guy? If we were doing this in person, I would make you scan this and type in your response, but I just want you to reflect for a moment, okay? So you walk into the bathroom, you meet this spider. Here were some of the responses from before. Things like, nope, not today, freaking out, running away, smashing it, killing it, freaking out. Did somebody say loving it? That person must really like spiders. So this is our perception, right? We're going to go into this next part. So let's think about some of these other things. The dentist. Let's see, you have to go to the dentist today. How are you feeling about that? Okay. Or you get a shot. You know you're going to this doctor's appointment. You know you're going to get a shot. Or that roller coaster. What's your reaction for these things? Getting pulled over. Ugh. Yep. Okay. So why are these your responses? If you had an instant triggered response to those things, why are these your responses? Well, the simple reason for this is that it's our perception. Okay. Our perception of these situations dictates our emotional response, and then our emotional response influences our reaction. So if I perceive the spider or the shot or going to the dentist as being a threat to my safety or how I'm feeling, then it's dictating that emotional response, that uneasiness, that feeling of upset or frustration or nervousness. And then that in turn is influencing my reaction to those things. Okay. If I don't perceive the spider, like that one person mentioned, loving it, if I don't perceive a spider as a threat, if I'm an entomologist and I study bugs for a living and I walk across a spider and I don't perceive it as a threat, I'm probably not going to have the same response as someone who is fearful of spiders and perceives them as being a threat. Okay. So this is what our topic is going to lead us to for today, is this power of perception. Okay. And the reason that I use a rainbow as kind of the mental image for this power of perception is that in order to see a rainbow, the light you have to be standing or viewing it from a certain angle. That's what gets the refraction of the light and how we get the rainbow, right? So this is our power of perception. So in conscious discipline, the power of perception tells us that no one can make you angry without your permission. We have to take responsibility for our own upset and frustration and anger. Okay. How we perceive a situation is our responsibility. Okay. Nobody else's. It's not our children's. It's not our spouse's. It's our responsibility. Okay. All right. And I know some of you are thinking like, no, my kids can make me angry, or my boss is so frustrating. My boss frustrates me all the time. But I want you to just kind of bear with me. Okay. You are the only one responsible for your feelings. And I know that's hard to sometimes sit with, but if you think about it, our responses, we know this has to be true. We know how we have to be responsible for our own feelings because we're all not, that person is not getting the same response as somebody who perceives it as a threat. And so when we look at some of these things that we looked at earlier, like a mouse or the traffic, people who have road rage with traffic, right? Or standing in lines. How many of us like hate standing in lines? But some people it doesn't bother, right? Going to the dentist. Some people don't have that reaction to going to the dentist. And some people we know are so stressed out by it. And our children fighting. Some people seem to be more relaxed about it. Doesn't bother them as much as others. And so we know that our perception is actually what's guiding our responsibilities, our responses in this. Whoever you believe to be in charge of your feelings, you have placed in charge of you. So if the traffic makes you angry, now the traffic is in charge of you. And if the children are making you frustrated, you've now placed the children in charge. Okay. So let's talk here for a moment about the difference between a reaction versus a response. A reaction is involuntary. It's coming out when you are in an emotional state or a survival state. Your body and your mind are relying on what is already pre-programmed into your brain in this situation. You are defaulting to something. This is the reaction. Okay. Instead, a response is conscious. It's a voluntary choice of an action. With the responses, we can actually imagine what the desired outcome is and then decipher what skills we need to try on to get us there. And so when we work with our kids, we want to ideally be in a response state, not a reaction state. The moment we realize that our kids, that how we react to our children's behavior has more to do with how we are feeling than what our kids are doing, is the moment that we can actually keep ourselves and realize that it's our responsibility to be emotionally healthy, right? Again, if we are reacting, we're in the survival and the emotional state of the brain. The response only happens when we are in the executive state. So we have to be in the executive state first. So let's talk for a little bit about our perception of children. Okay. What is your perception of children? The Reggio philosophy and also the Montessori philosophy, a lot of these philosophies focus on this image of the child. How are we viewing the children that we interact with? And how does this influence the way that we interact with them? Okay. So if we view children and perceive them as being what some traditional models of discipline might say as being naughty, or they're being impatient or rude or bossy or clingy or stubborn or manipulative, deceitful, they're attention seeking, right? So if we're perceiving them as all of these negatives, then we might be more inclined to be frustrated with them, to be short with them, to be punitive with them. Instead, if we can switch our perception of children into the positive, it changes the way that we're interacting in these situations. So instead of attention seeking, we might say that the child is connection seeking, and how powerful that is into changing how we're interacting with them. Instead of saying stubborn, maybe we acknowledge that this child is very persistent. Maybe they are super capable, or thoughtful or resilient. Maybe they're playful or fierce, motivated, observant, instead of a wallflower, right? If we change how we're thinking about these behaviors, it changes what we're doing to teach or to discipline in these moments. Okay. As you can see, this child, it shows how capable children are. This is a 1-year-old and who is actually cutting a piece of fruit with a machete, essentially. Our perception determines whether we punish the child or teach new skills. If we're triggered, we can actively calm ourselves, choose a new perception, and respond helpfully instead of reacting from unhealthy, pre-programmed messages. Okay. So how do we change our perception? Well, first, we have to just be aware of it. Okay. So that might be acknowledging that we are in our emotional or survival state. And so these are just some examples of how to be aware that we are negatively perceiving something. So your breathing might get tight. Like, pay attention to that physiological response that your body is having that's showing that you're in that emotional state or that survival state. So if you are getting aggressive, or if you are using sarcasm, that's typically a good indicator that you are in a situation in which you are perceiving it to be a threat. If you think that you're right and everyone else is wrong, you are definitely in that emotional brain state. You are not in a collaborative brain state. If you are anxious or feeling defensive, all of these things show us that we are perceiving something to be as a threat to our sense of connectedness or our safety. So once we are aware of that, then we can start choosing to rewire our brain and to see something from a different lens. So we can change from a complication to a challenge, or from a problem to an opportunity, right? If my child is engaging in a problem that I have to fix, that looks very different than this is an opportunity for me to teach my child how to be successful. Okay, so we have to switch our lens. So one example I used to use even in my classroom was a flip it exercise. So I want you to think about a situation that maybe felt yucky to you. Maybe it's like you're late on your way to work. Maybe it's that you have to do all these dishes and chores when you get home, whatever. Just come up with some situation in which you feel like there is a negative. Okay. This was actually the little worksheet that I used to give to my kindergartners and first graders. You could do this with younger kids too and just have them draw. So we want to take that negative situation and then we want to find the positive, right? We're making a choice to see it from a different lens. Now, I want to give a disclaimer here. I'm not saying you have to engage in that toxic positivity all the time. Everything's happy 100% of the time, but it's not what we're doing. But we do want to somehow change our lens, especially when we're working with our kids in order to teach these new skills, okay? So, for example, I had a child who was late to class almost every single day. It was out of her realm of control, right? Her mother dropped her off late to school every single day, and it was a struggle. She had a lot of places to go. She had multiple children that she was trying to rush around to different schools. It was hard, right? She couldn't control the traffic or anything. It just is what it was. And so this child hated it. She hated coming late to school every day, and she had no control over it. And so I gave her one of these flip-its one day, and she sat there and she looked at it for a little while. And then a few moments later, she brought it back up to me. And she had written on the one side that, I'm late to school every day was her negative. And then her positive was, but mommy gets me to school every day safe. She gets me and my brothers to school every single day safe. So even though we're late, we're all safe and we all still make it to school. And just how powerful this can be in changing our perception of things, right? So in order to teach children to behave differently, we must first see them differently. Okay? We have to see them as capable. If we see them as manipulative, we're going to punish rather than if we see them as lacking a skill. Okay. So I want you to challenge yourself to see your child's mistakes as opportunities to teach, and remember that this relationship with them is more important and that they are watching what you are doing more than what you are saying. Okay, so you have to be the model for these things. We cannot expect our children to do these things if we cannot do them ourselves. So we're going to play a little game, misbehavior or missing skill. Okay, so try to identify what the missing skill is for each one of these scenarios. If your toddler is throwing food on the floor, what might be the missing skill? Might be the language, right? They might not have the language to tell you that they're all done. So this is where we can start teaching maybe baby sign, all done, or you can teach them the words, all done, we're finished. Okay. Child takes a toy out of a sibling's hand. Maybe the missing skill there is that they don't know how to ask for a turn. Self-regulation, teaching them how to learn how to take a deep breath when they're frustrated or to find other possible solutions to their problems. Child has tantrums where they kick, hit, bang their head on the ground. So again, self-regulation is probably the missing skill here. They need some strategies for keeping themselves safe when they're feeling frustrated. They yell in a library, church, or movie theater. Volume control, right? So practicing the difference between loud and quiet in moments of calm where you're not at these places. So that way they can access that skill when they're in the situation. Okay. So now we're going to look at how the discipline skill of composure relates to the power of perception. Okay. Composure is your willingness to change your internal state from that reactive to that calm. Okay. So we know perception is influencing this. But now we have to practice the skill of composure. modeling self-control and composure is more important than just telling your child to do it, which is hard because, again, how many of us had parents who grew up and constantly said things like, do as I say, not as I do, right? Or maybe you were spanked as a child, but then you were told not to hit your brother or your sister or your friends, right? So how these things were modeled to us is what these children are picking up on, okay? That doesn't work according to these, how the child's brain learns. They are learning through modeling. They are learning through what they are seeing and experiencing, what they are actually experiencing on a day-to-day. And so we have to be able to model these things for our kids for them to also learn these skills. They're watching us all the time. So we have to practice composure when we are upset for our children to see that this is a skill that works, right? A skill that they need to learn, which is so hard. It's so hard when we are feeling frustrated. Composure isn't a life skill. It just to remind myself, I am feeling frustrated. I'm feeling overwhelmed. It's okay to feel these things. Parenting and teaching children is hard, right? But at the same time, I've got this, right? I'm safe. We're safe. This is not an emergency. It's hard, but it's not an emergency. We're all safe. And I can respond to my children with love and empathy. I'm capable. Okay. So just having that little mantra for yourself can be super helpful in practicing composure. Learning breathing exercises, right? Learning to take deep breaths when you are dysregulated, or learning grounding strategies. Some people like to practice meditation, okay? To be able to move through, to partner with our kids, to find a way out of it, to find a way out of these stressful situations, okay? And remember, a dysregulated adult cannot regulate a dysregulated child. So if you are in that survival part of your brain, if you are in that emotional state of your brain, you are not accessing those skills that are in your prefrontal cortex in order to teach them to your child. So you have to be in that frontal cortex first before you can teach the skill to your child. And I just want to say here, one of the things that I hear is like, well, I yelled at them and they stopped, right? I hear you. I hear you. Maybe it worked in that instance, but you have not replaced that behavior with a skill, which means you are going to keep seeing it. You haven't replaced the skill. You haven't made a new pathway or connection for their brain. And so while it may have stopped in the moment, you have not taught something new to replace it, right? So another way that we can look at helping ourselves regain composure when we're feeling frustrated when parenting is to identify our triggers, right? We have to take responsibility for ourselves, figure out what our triggers are, and manage them within the things that are within our realm of control, okay? So how many of you have done the exercises before where you have like the circle or the two circles and you're in the center of the circle? And the things within the bubble or within the circle are the things that are within your control, and identifying all those things that are within your control. And in this instance, we want to talk about things that are within your realm of control when it comes to parenting, okay? And then things that are outside of your realm of control. Things that you have no influence over, okay? So normally I would have you do a little exercise here to talk about what are some things that are within your realm of control. Well, your thoughts are within your realm of control, your words, your reactions to things, the way that your behaviors, the way that you react, those are all within your realm of control when it comes to parenting. What are some things that are outside the realm of your control? Some of them might be things like the weather. I can't control how my child feels. They feel the way that they do. I can't control the weather. If it's yucky outside, I have no control over what the weather's doing. I have to just accept it and keep moving forward, right? So identifying what your triggers are. Mine is, I don't like overlapping sounds. So I mentioned that in my other class. Sound is a big trigger for me. So managing sound as best as I can. What sounds can I control? What sounds can I turn off in the space? So I'm less likely to feel elevated and anxious. My child's nails scratching me can be a big trigger for me. So when they're upset and they get kind of in that primal state and they're fighting and scratching, can be a very big trigger for me. So what's way I can control that? Well, I can keep my child's nails filed so that way I'm not triggered by their nails on my skin if they get frustrated or elevated, because they will. They're kids. They're going to get frustrated, right? Children that, another one for me is like when they're climbing all over me when I'm eating. So a way I can control that is to actually make sure that when I'm eating as well, they're also clipped into their high chairs or their booster seats or whatever. Or maybe I don't eat some days if I'm feeling really escalated until their nap time or when they've gone to bed. So that way I'm not in that sensory overload state, right? So I challenge you to really consider what your triggers are when parenting your children and to figure out what is within your realm of control. And how can you manage that to minimize your triggers as much as you possibly can? And I get there's going to be situations in which you can't control everything that's going on, right? But the idea here is to bring down as much control as much as we can, so that way when things are out of our control, we're not as frustrated or triggered by them. Okay. So here's some examples of how you can download calm to your situation, right? So if you've managed your triggers as much as you can, next, what do we do, right? So let's say there's still something that's happened. There's still something out of our control. How do we practice that composure? And so everyone kind of has their go-to strategies. A lot of people, it's just taking a deep breath. Okay, I've got this, right? Practicing that mantra, sportscasting or narrating what's happening, right? Not responding yet, but just, okay, you're frustrated, you're screaming at me. I get it. You want another snack, right? Just like narrating what's happening to bring yourself into the present moment. Looking at your child's hand. If there's a lot going on, maybe just like backing yourself against the wall and getting that sensory input for yourself of like being against something that's stabilizing you. Okay. Taking a moment. Maybe you need to place your child in a safe space and take a moment to just like get yourself regulated before you try to solve the situation. Okay. So we need to practice this composure and tell them, I'm feeling really frustrated right now. I need a minute. I'm going to set you here and keep you safe. I'm going to walk away and take some deep breaths for a second, and then I'll come back to get you and we'll figure out how to solve this. Okay. You're modeling composure for them. So remember, this is about progress, not perfection. Okay. So take one thing from tonight that you want to practice in the coming weeks ahead. Is it you want to model deep breathing? Maybe it's as simple as that. Maybe you just want to practice and be actively trying on taking deep breaths throughout your day. That will be so impactful for your interactions with your child if you can just practice deep breathing by yourself and with them multiple times a day and modeling that, right? Maybe it is reframing your image of the child. So maybe you have been previously brought up in a very traditional model of discipline that tells you to view children as being manipulative or naughty, right? And maybe you just want to practice when your child is having an outburst or doing something that instead view it as not being naughty, but they're curious, right? Oh, I see you're curious about what that does, what that pen does. You may not write on the wall with it, but you're curious about it. Let's find a way for you to explore that in a healthy way, right? So changing our perception, practice changing your perception of the child. Maybe it's managing your own triggers, right? So maybe it's about managing, figuring out what those triggers are for you and just figuring out what's within your realm of control. Okay. And I always like to end on this quote about just don't let yourself become so concerned with raising a good kid that you forget that you already have one. Thank you.